Yakimasu. So everybody grab a cat, place them in your lap. If you don't have a cat, pretend. And doing zazen with them. Noticing your weight, where your weight is. See if there's some weight being held up. Let the weight trickle down through an open, upright, empty body. So the weight just trickles down to find the lowest places to settle. And the more you settle the weight and settle the tensions, the more the upper body is emptied. Upper body, the posture is clarified, emptied, very open, upright. As more and more weight and tensions are released down, allowed to sift and settle and drift downward. Just give it all over to the floor, the ground. That's what the ground is there for. And really enjoy the ensuing release and lengthening and opening. Then each time you exhale, back to the process of releasing. Also, the exhale and the release is the grounding element. If you just only did the clarifying, emptying, opening, lengthening, that can become a little bit ungrounded and a little bit spacey. So each time, just the thought, just the intention on each exhale to settle a bit more. That's enough to counter that yang energy and to ground it. So we have this continuous grounding and settling and a commensurate, continuous opening, lengthening, emptying. So again, each out breath, releasing more, and that creates a little bit more opening, emptying. An imagery that comes to mind that I like somewhat is you imagine a balloon that would naturally rise. So either an air-filled balloon that rises very easily and naturally, or even a helium-filled balloon on a string. That string is tied to kind of like a platform, like a wooden cross platform or some sort of platform that keeps it down so it doesn't just float up to the sky. So that would be an example of floating up continuously, being too floaty, being ungrounded. So our spine is that string. Our head is that balloon filled with air. The head is the balloon. The spine is that string. And our hips, or the part of our ground connecting to touching the ground, that's that heavy platform, a weighted platform, keeping it securely anchored. It's grounded, it's anchored, it's stable, but at the same time, it's always this opening, lengthening. It's always this rising. That's a really good example because it has those two different directions, two different qualities. Your spine is that string. The head is the balloon that's always wanting to become more upright, but connected, anchored with gravity, connected to the ground. And then in the middle, release the abdomen. The long spine is a string. The balloon continually float up, but a weighted base. In the middle, release the abdomen. And again, with each out breath, you can maybe do that even a little bit better. Each moment, each out breath, release a bit more and enliven that imagery, make it more real, a little bit more real with each out breath. And slowly coming up and taking that into standing. So again, using that imagery, it can be a very helpful imagery. It triggers those things we want. So for one thing, directly as an example, is the spine is long and straight, like that string. In fact, that string is gently pulled straight, gently taut, not stiff. If you were to hit the string, it'll warble and move. It's very flexible and light, but left with its own devices, it's nicely taut, not rigid, not stiff, but also not slack. So it's very straight. If you're to touch it, be very, very flexible. So that string is our spine. Again, the head is that balloon that's always rising. And the base is now our feet. So you can either have your hands just hanging or at your center, whichever you like, and just working with that imagery again and noticing, appreciating how it changes the body. If you try to embody this imagery, each out breath, releasing more. Good, and that's a good example or imagery or essence, again, to take into everything in our movement. So as we're moving, the crown is always facing directly to the sky, flush to the sky, to the ceiling, just flush with it. So not angled this way, flush, always wanting to meet the sky. The spine is always pulled long, the weight is always sinking. So that's in everything that we do. So this may be an imagery that triggers some good things for you that you can relate to. And so as we try to live that inside, embody that, come into some basic movement. What's very useful again, with this imagery, it becomes fairly apparent when I lose that vertical line, where that string obviously is no longer nicely pulled vertical. Not happening now, and all kinds of tension occurs. So it becomes very clear when I deviate from that and I get misaligned. Also, another example is if my chin comes up, this is a very normal thing. A lot of people do this. Part of it is because the neck muscles are very short because of all kind of society we have, a lot of computer stuff. It's also the reason why these muscles are short, tightness there. So that's not the string that's gently pulled taut. So that can inform my body. And of course, the weight's in the base. So that string and balloon is nicely anchored with weight. That's our feet. And slowly coming to centered stillness, clasping the hands, nice big circles. And use your hips as well, legs and hips. And release those shoulders. And the other way. Gentle exploration of your range of motion. And then alternating each time. Sink into your hip each time. Good, and then lateral or horizontal circles. Explore the side range of motion, the side. And going forward, not leaning from your lower back, but sinking into a squat to get that reach. Sinking into a squat to get that reach. And other way. Right to the side. Good, and alternating. Come back to the center and go the other way, back to center, go the other way. Use the legs, use the feet connected to the ground. Pressing into the foot, into the ground, rather than heaving your upper body. Upper body can only hang vertical, like that string. Good. Sink down, up over one shoulder, Down the middle, really using your legs, up over the other shoulder. For a bit more of a stretch, you can come up off that back heel. Work those legs, nice deep squat. Breathe out as you come down in the middle, breathe in as you come up. Good. Bring your heels close, knees bent, hip circles. Maybe a little bigger each time. And the other way. And slide the hands down to the knees. Another way. And then apart. Feel the pressure on the bottoms of the feet. You can actually release tension in the feet with this motion. And together. And coming up using the hips and doing a few spinal waves, bringing the hips forward, rolling up through the spine, right up to the top of the head, back with the hips and down again, pulling the hips forward, rolling up the spine. Good. A little further apart. Bend the knees, flatten the lower back, and rolling the spine sideways. Starting with the tailbone, moving up the spine one vertebrae at a time. Good. Rolling the shoulders. Away. Good. And the chin, you draw a circle, kind of like you're drawing a circle on the wall in front of you with the chin. And start small. And then maybe make the circle bigger each time until the chin is dropping right down and going up. And then slowly start the other direction, starting small, gradually getting bigger if the movement feels good. Good, and then drawing a straight line from wall to wall. Still hanging out, hips are still hanging. Belly released. And chin down and just rolling the chin along chest. Breathing the whole time. Back to center, up, arch back, maybe a little wider, arching back to the back corner, equal awareness through both arms, equal energy flow through both arms, stay low in the hips. So watch out, what can tend to happen is people bring their weight into the upper body. In a sense, and this applies all the time, when we're doing our techniques, doing our movements, it's as if you only exist from here. So this is another imagery. We talked about the imagery of the string and the balloon. This is a different imagery. You get the sense that not to use the upper body. You only exist from here down, or the only weight there is from here down. So that's the opposite of normal people. Untrained people, they're weight upper side and upper body oriented. So they do something like that in this kind of action. It's all in their upper body, both in terms of tension and their weight. Even though your upper body is going to be bending and turning and stretching, it's as if all the weight is from here down and just keeps dropping from here down. So here I'm stretching, my weight is through my hips and legs. Now here I'll bring it into my upper body. That's in my upper body. And that's tension and disintegration. So I want the weight falling from the hips to the legs, even though my torso is stretching and bending and leaning, feel as if all the weight is below the waist. So notice if you're up in your upper body, that's not as good for the stretch, and it's not good training for what we want. So weight is upper side, and there's tension, and upper body is totally separated from the lower body. Even though you're moving upper body, stretching, leaning the upper body, the weight is as if you were just from the hips down. Now, if it's comfortable and you have the range of motion, your intention at least, maybe not your eyes or your body, you go to the other back corner, the far back corner. So instead of the close back corner, I send my attention to the other back corner without straining. So just sending your attention to the other back corner will allow a little bit more stretch if you're warmed up and ready for that. Again, notice if you creep up into the upper body with your weight and your tension. Good. And long forward stance, big arc. Big forward. Breathe. Good. Coming up using the leg, not the lower back. Press into the ground. Pumping you up from the leg, not the lower back. The leg forward. Relax and breathe into the stretch. Send the mind and the energy forward. Stretching the back of the front leg. Let your weight sink through your legs and feet. Come up by pressing the leg and foot into the ground, circumventing your lower back. You totally bypass your lower back. Okay. Again, let me know if you have any questions as we go along, any comments. So let's do Ami no Kamai. Real quick, we'll go through that. Slightly forward. But we're back to that string being pulled gently taut by the balloon. And we're always anchored and grounded because of the weighted platform. Ami no Kamai. Both arms are equal. It's as if you're doing this totally equal. But because you have the hip turn, Hanmi means half. Ami no Kamai means half stance. Rather than full frontal, half, like a blade or an arrow, triangular. And that's very representative of the Irimi mindset, entering, focused. All right. So that's the only reason why the arms aren't exactly the same is because I've angled, I've bladed, or I've turned that hip, but the arms are actually equal, just like Manucci. So what tends to happen, of course, is people got to forget about this back one. It gets kind of ignored. It goes to sleep. It becomes a little bit dead. It might be active with this one, but this one is not active. They're totally equal, just like Manucci, completely equal, completely the same. This is defensive or offensive, just like this one. But practice that awareness, totally equal. Weighted platform, rising crown or balloon. The spine is gently, naturally brought, gently taut, naturally taut. Not collapsed, not condensed, not constricted. Always stretching and opening. And that translated through the shoulders and the arms. So I'm not sticking my arms out. This opening, lengthening, releasing, extending, stretching quality is simply transferred to the arms. It's simply through gear system translated to the arms. This process through intentional vectors is just simply translated, same thing through here. And other side. Switching on me without rising up and down, so keeping the base, keeping the base, keeping the base. So I don't want that base that's holding the string and the balloon to pop up. The other day, we were actually moving the feet very lightly as the hips continue to hang and fall. So even though we're grounded, the feet are free without bobbing up and down. Good. Now, basic Tenkai, which is pivot. So just white belt program, we just basically arms don't really do anything. Arms keep the same positioning. Shifting back, turning on the front heel, shifting forward, other foot becomes the front. Shifting back, turning on the heel, turning on the heel. Anchored, settled, weight underside the whole time. Release the abdomen. The mind is continually flowing out. The only reason why you're turning is because you're sending the attention way out in front of you. Way out. It's like your weather vane. You talked about a windsock. It's also something like a weather vane, something called a weather vane. And when the wind changes, it moves that weather vane. The body is the weather vane or the windsock. In this case, the weather vane. The wind changes, it moves the weather vane. Body is that receptacle, that open vessel, weather vane. The mind is the wind, the intentional current. The intentional flow is the flow of the wind. So my intentional current moves me. That's very dynamic and integrated and whole. Okay. Let's do one or two other movements from the White Belt program, basic foundational fundamental movements. That's in everything we do. Tenkan Undo, 90 degrees. Stay in a forward stance for this level. Turning 90 degrees. Still hanging from the string or weighted stable platform. Rising balloon, lengthened open spine. And pushing up that back leg drives the arms forward into an arc. Leg settling back into that back position, draws the arms down in that big arc. So more experienced people, big, huge arc forward. But you can't deviate from vertical because you are naturally aligning with that rise and the sink. The rise and the sink. And gravity works vertically, 90 degrees, perpendicular to the earth, right? It's perpendicular always to the earth. So that's why we're always this way. Okay. Even though our arms are out here, so as big an arc as you can make. The more experienced people see how grounded you can be and also lengthening and rising. The lower body, all the weights in the lower body, and continue to fall. In fact, free falls. Upper body only gets more and more released and open, just like we did in the Zazen. As we release weight and tension, the body, upper body just becomes more open, more spacious, more generous, more expansive. In this case, with the balloon, we can be a little bit more specific with that vector, that sense of a line, a vertical line, hotly pulled string. Okay, and then we can adopt the other stance. It doesn't matter, but just to start with the other stance, we can do the 180 degrees. So stepping on the ball of the foot, turning, staying in the front stance, slightly front. Stepping on the ball of the foot, turning, foot comes back, but you're staying, keeping that leg forward. And then you work on keeping pristinely vertical, and the feet drive the arms. And then more experienced people add that wind current. The wind is turning the weather vane. Your body is that open, empty vessel. The weather vane turned by the current of the wind. And that's the current of your intention. Your intentional direction, your intentional flow. Good. Any questions or comments with that? Let me know. There's always deeper we can go with principles and qualities. Okay. Now, Kokyo Undo, everything applies to what we were just doing, the Tenkan Undos that we're doing, the 90 and 180. In particular, the 180, because that's what we do with Kokyo Undo. All those things apply. We're not bringing the arms here. So As I step forward, again, the integration of the body, that arm is brought forward, but it doesn't really do anything, right? So I'm just turning around my center line. Everything is still integrated, the same, still whole, still integrated, still unified, still opening and expanding. I'm not articulating anything separately. And you do want to have the sense of being very accurate, right to center line, throat, sternum, chin. In other words, I wouldn't want to do something like this, right? Away. This is all open. So be very precise, center line. And the arms really aren't doing anything. They're just keeping same shape, really. In front of the turning center. Okay, and as you know, in this program, 7th Q, we go into Sayuendo. So you went nice and big shape. Now, of course, what can happen, so let's talk about refinement a little bit. What can happen, I go into a big movement, especially a movement that seems to be to one side. What's going to tend to happen? Maybe some leaning, hiking up. My weight comes up into my upper body. Remember the stretch we did? Even when we have a nice big stretch, I might even bend back like I'm doing, the limbo. Especially if I'm doing the limbo, much weight as you can keep in the lower body, the lower you can go. The more weight you have in the upper body, the sooner you're going to tip over, right? So even though I'm stretching, leaning, weight is from here down. So that really applies to something like Sayuendo. Again, what beginners will do is they'll lean, we pulled off. So this stays long and taut, the base is there. Or you continually sink down through this vertical axis. And the more you sink down through that vertical axis, the more you can reach and stretch. The more you sink down, the more ground you have, the more roots you have. The more you sink down, more root, the deeper the root, the more you can extend out and still be stable. If I extend out more than the root I have, I extend out more than the base I have, then I get out of balance. I get toppled, I'm now out of balance. The yin and yang are not balanced anymore. But if I continue the yin, sinking, 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 commensurate with the stretch, I'm always in balance. So the more I sink and settle, the more I can stretch and reach. So now, putting that together, Kokyo into a big Sayuendo. So that's what I'd like you to do, is make that really big and really spacious, but notice if you're compromising yourself. The reason why it gets bigger and more spacious is because you're more and more anchored or rooted. 1, 2. 1, 2. Now with this big movement, watch that the arm doesn't get dislocated from the center line. So I have to continue to have the mindfulness and intent to keep everything in front of my center line. Especially when I'm doing this transitioning move in front of my center line. As I do the transitioning, I can lose that alignment very easily, right? Okay, now bring that into just one beat. So turn, sink. Step, turn, sink. With the 2 beats, you get a chance to kind of make the second one a little better than the first. You learn from the first beat and then improve it on the second beat. And also the 2 beats give you time to kind of relax into it, use gravity better on the second beat. There's a rhythm, a relaxing rhythm. So that's why it's done first. The second version is more advanced because you have to get all that relaxation, settledness, weight underside on one try, as best you can. So you've already settled into the hip, already sinking into the hip, already settling down through that vertical line, right down through the hip. So by the time your foot touches down, you're already sinking down through the hip. Nice big spacious shape with the upper body and arms. Take your time to breathe, keep your vertical alignments. And just like we were doing a few minutes ago, the more you can sink through the hips, the more you can drop the weight, the more it opens up your shape. Notice when you do the sayuendo, if you're crunching the shoulder blades together, muscles between the spine and the shoulder blade, notice if you're crunching that, coming back. So you don't want, just like you want the hand and the wrist in front of your center line, same idea here. You don't want the arm past the line of your body. That's disintegrated, right? It's discombobulated. You're unintegrated. You can be pulled and affected. So on that big sayuendo, make sure that you're not crunching the muscles between the shoulder blade and the spine. It stays open. That means you have to turn the hip more to get that arm back. Okay, so this is a refinement for all the senpai. So 7th kyu and up. So this is, it will be good to work on a little bit. The movement is looking really good, integrated, coordinated, unified, all that's good. So this is a refinement. So it's very good, actually. So we just want to add more thinking. It's very, very good. So now there's room in your brain and your body to add a little bit more of a certain dimension, which is going to be the down. But what I'm seeing is really good coordinated movement. Everything's connected, moving together. You're getting a solid movement here. You're not going too far back. All that's good. So now emphasize the sink, drop and sink to make that happen. So I'm going to sink without leaning. I'm going to sink without leaning. So you're already sinking before your foot is totally flat and solid. You're already thinking. You're already sinking through that one hip, vertical line through that one hip before your foot is totally flat and stable. So yeah, Cheryl, more like that. That's right. So that would be, yes, Mladen, that's good. So add more of the grounding or the thinking to make the sayuendo big. Good. Excellent, right? So when you're interacting with someone, whether it's in a martial way or in a friendly way, the other person should be interacting with the ground through you. So let me touch upon this a little bit more. So even though everything was looking really good, nicely integrated, good shape, it's even quite powerful. If you imagine someone behind me, and I'm going to give them my power here. I'm going to give them a little shot, maybe to the chest. And so I can develop a certain amount of power, good amount of power. I'm using my hips, using my legs, but it's just me. I can generate a certain amount of power, but it's just me. It's just me. If I add a sink, if I add a controlled free fall, it's no longer just me interacting with them. It's gravity. Here, this is just me. I'm trying to turn quite strongly and unified and mechanically good from the hips. But if I add think, then they're interacting with more than just me. So let's try a few more so that you're bigger than yourself. You're joining with gravity. You're joining with the earth. So when you touch them or interact with them, they're not touching or interacting with you. It's including now all of gravity and the earth. So Cheryl, that's way more dynamic and powerful. I don't want to be at the receiving end of that unless I want to go for a little trip. Yeah. So it's not just me, it's not just you, it's connecting to the larger universe, literally. So when you have to get someone, it's a spiritual experience for them. It will be for you, but hopefully for them too, because it wasn't just you, it was the whole thing that you can, as much as you can open up to, as much as you can open up to and connect to, that's the big piece that interacts with them. Now we get better at opening bigger and larger, so more and more of the whole picture, the whole thing is interacting, right? So let's take that into, I see we're almost done here. Let's see if we can take that into misogi. It's time for misogi. So just bringing that idea, feeling, thought into misogi. Is it just you? Is it just you and your little body that ends right here, 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 ends right here? Is it just you doing it? Doesn't have to be. Doesn't have to be. Doesn't have to be you doing it, this little isolated thing, doing it in this much bigger thing. You can include much more, a much bigger picture, a much more participating, agreeing, larger piece, participating and agreeing in the movement. Larger space, larger breath, larger sinking deeper to the ground, larger rising to the sky. You don't have to end here, you go to the sky. You don't have to end here, you go to the center of the earth. You don't have to end here, it's as big as the environment. Not just you, doesn't have to be. Open and include and partner with a bigger picture, bigger sense. And then take that out into your world. Okay, let's